The views and opinions expressed by the following program are those of the host, guests, and callers and are not necessarily those of this station or Webster Rock Hill Ministries, its management, or other hosts or underwriting sponsors. Programs presented by KWRH-LP are for educational and entertainment purposes only.
Welcome back to In Tune. This is Arnold Stricker with Ellie Wharton. We are streaming live on Facebook. Hello, Facebook friends. And in studio, we have Amy and Amrit Gill back in studio. It's good to see you guys again.
Good to see you.
Welcome back to In Tune. And they are from Restoration St. Louis and have invested hundreds of millions of dollars in revitalizing and really keeping some St. Louis neighborhoods and some buildings intact. They have a real love for architecture and an appreciation for that. And some of the things that you guys are doing down in the Grove, unbelievable. And the things that you're doing in not only St. Louis but other communities of preserving buildings that have some history value to them, some historical value, some very interesting architectural features, very prominent buildings. And recently, you opened up and we did an interview on Hotel St. Louis, went down and did a walkthrough down there with you, and that's a great place to be. But recently, you purchased the chemical building right next door at 721 Olive, and you're going to start a renovation down there. And I don't know where to start. Tell us about. I'm sure that place is, I don't want to call it a dump inside, but if it's well over 100 years old and probably needs a lot of TLC.
Yes, and somebody went in there and gutted it.
Oh.
So there's some interesting stuff left, like some beautiful mosaics in the front lobby and the entry on Olive, etc. And some beautiful marble hallways,
cool.
Wainscoting and things like that left. But we unfortunately don't have an intact building to start with that we can kind of figure out, what the architect was thinking in terms of interior finishes, etc. But it's a gorgeous building.
So how are you gonna attack that? How are you going to approach figuring out what you need to do? Because like you said, Amrit, sometimes you can kind of see what the architect wanted to do. And in this particular case, this building is a Henry Ives Cobb 1896 building, originally designed by him. He's a Boston native. And my understanding is there was a little competition between him and
Louis Sullivan, yes.
Right, Louis Sullivan. And Sullivan had two designs to be right next door to
the Union Trust.
The Union Trust building, and he lost that to this particular architect. And it was kind of poo-pooed at first, but it has kind of come into its own as a very prominent architectural building.
It's funny because Louis Sullivan designed two buildings to go next door that were subordinate to our 705
right.
Union Trust building. And the people that were paying for the new buildings said, well, wait a minute, that's not right. So they picked Henry Ives Cobb to design this building that was supposed to dwarf our building. It's a foot taller, right? Or a story taller. And then they built it, and everybody said, oh, that is not a nice building. And the Union Trust building is the significant building way back then. And now, of course, they're both considered, icons of architecture. So it's pretty funny.
Here's an interesting little tidbit, though, that I don't know that you figured out in your research. But the Chemical National Bank is the one that built this building.
Okay.
Originally, and it was only along Olive. It wasn't that little leg that's on 8th Street. They never moved in.
Seriously?
It was being built as their headquarters. They got bought before the building was finished, and the new bank already had a headquarters, and they didn't move in.
Oh.
So they never actually occupied. So the chemical building was never actually occupied by the Chemical National Bank.
That's very interesting, because that building had been used for, my understanding here in my research was there was some research that was done there, making medicine, doing experiments by scientists, helping health situations, and it has survived the wrecking ball because I'm sure people wanted to knock it down at some point in time.
Well, there was an actual Louis Sullivan hotel where the old post office is that got knocked down so they would build the post office, believe it or not. So there are lots of buildings that have been knocked down over the years in downtown St. Louis for other purposes, but this building has survived, and it is a beautiful building. I mean, the exterior of the building is stunning with the bay windows and the cast iron.
The red terracotta is just
Yes.
so beautiful.
It's gorgeous. And with the first 2 stories are cast iron?
Yes.
Correct.
That's crazy to me. That's just...
Actually, the bay windows that go up all the way are supported on the second floor with a cast iron structure.
Okay.
So.
And it's there's bay windows every so often. Like I think one person described it as waves.
Right. Yeah, it undulates across the face
Right.
of it. It's very cool.
And it's very unique.
And it will be fun. I mean, we're gonna obviously we're going to put hotel rooms in it, and we're going to put apartments in it. We intend to have another rooftop bar, and then I've already had a meeting this morning with somebody who wants to put a restaurant in there. So we already have interest from local people to do some really fun things in the building, and I think that's what ties it all together.
Right.
Is this kind of local participation in our buildings and making it not just some extension of Hotel St. Louis, but also like a local thing that people will really want to go to.
And it has a ballroom also. Most of those hotels had a ballroom. Is that correct? Or does it have a ballroom?
It doesn't have a ballroom
Really?
currently.
Okay.
It might have one when we're done with it.
Okay.
But
We'll have a couple actually junior ballrooms probably. when we're done with it.
there's a low roof section in the back. So it was originally built as one leg and then another, so it looks kind of like an L, maybe like a backwards L actually. And then in the center of that L is a low section. It's only 1 story tall.
Okay.
So that was built, a long time ago, but it's basically not historically significant. It's just 1 story. There's nothing
And it
glamorous.
abuts the alley, so.
Yeah, there's nothing glamorous about it. So we feel like we can make that 1 story section a ballroom.
That makes sense. And the backs of those buildings were never really meant to be seen. All the emphasis was put up front, or if it was on a corner, around the sides.
Strangely enough, this building has an exterior cast iron staircase that goes all the way up the back of the building.
And it's really cool.
It's very
Wow.
really
It's
cool.
beautiful, and
it's
it's ornamental.
almost like a giant circular staircase that goes up the back of the building, which the previous person who bought this building was gonna just wall it off and kind of just make it go away because he didn't want to deal with it. It's going to require a lot of work, but we feel like it's one of the most beautiful features of the hotel.
Right.
So we're going to fix it.
Yeah,
So
we're gonna restore it back to
Yeah, cast iron out, 100 years old, in the elements. I'm sure there's
Yeah.
a lot of rusted. Now, how many stories is the building?
17.
17.
So you'd be coming from, the 17th floor or the 16th floor down, possibly down that circular staircase on the outside.
I've walked it.
Oh my gosh. That'd give me the creeps.
It's
I've
actually
walked it.
really
It's
cool, but
fine.
it's indoors. So
Oh, it is
it's
indoors.
actually-
Oh,
It's
Okay.
indoors. It's not outdoors.
Oh.
And the windows originally, even though it's kind of circular, the windows were not circular from what we can make out.
Oh.
They were actually angled glass set within this.
Okay. No, I thought it was outside.
No,
inside.
It sticks out from the plane of the building, but it's
Gotcha.
it's actually enclosed.
Okay. I'm looking at a picture here, folks. Oh, that's gorgeous. Oh my gosh. You can't get that kind of metal work anymore.
No, so you're right. Mostly the back of these buildings weren't meant to be seen, but obviously Henry Ives Cobb expected this one to be seen from the back.
So you're looking at a restaurant. You're maybe looking at some shops downstairs on the ground floor.
Yes,
And-
it'll also be an extension of an expansion of our spa.
Okay.
So we have a full day spa with men's and women's locker rooms that open up into a small pool and a hot tub.
Okay, and you'll connect via like a sky bridge between the buildings or something like that, or
No, just across the alley.
just right across
We're
the alley?
we're gonna ask the city to close that section of the alley since now we own both.
Okay.
And put a connector
Okay,
in
that
between
makes
the
sense.
two, and you'll just be able to walk right through.
Okay.
So we're not closing the alley all the way, just enough to create
Right, to create
connection. Yes.
that little bridge area. Okay. And to the west of you is the old post office, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so just giving some people a reference point of where this is. So you have the Hotel St. Louis, and then now the chemical building, and then the next. Is it the next block?
Yes,
Is
the
okay.
entire block.
So you have the
Yeah.
entire
Post
block.
office.
Very
Yeah.
cool. Very cool.
Which is also cool because our windows will be able to look out over St. Louis because OPO is so low, right? It's only 3 stories. So if
looking
you're in
out
our
west,
building, you
you're
can
looking-
look out
yeah.
west. You can see really far. So that'll be really cool too.
So you anticipate this being open the fall or winter of 2020?
That is correct.
Okay. So as we kind of talked, it's already been gutted. So you have an architect kind of plan out, these are the kind of rooms we want. Do you kind of give them a little license? You obviously have trusted an architect, or you have designs for that?
So Nathan Zierer, who was our architect for Checkmate Design for Hotel St. Louis, has been putting in the rooms into the floor plan.
Okay.
And I think it's pretty close to Amy's approval at this stage.
Okay.
And then also the apartments. And then once we have it all kind of laid out and penciled in, a diagram, that's when we'll turn it over to an architect.
Okay. Wow. And you've already worked with contractors and have great relationships with them, so you're ready to roll on this thing.
Yep. BSI will be the contractor on this project.
Okay, I thought that was going to be a really fast timeline, but you guys are a machine.
Well, we're really lucky because our staff is already, they know what we like, they know
Right.
what we want. So it's easy to look at it and say, oh, okay, that'll fly, that won't fly, right? So it's pretty easy for him to look through it and kind of course, I say that. He would not say it was easy, but,
Right. Are you going to kind of keep some of the things from Hotel St. Louis and transfer them, like some of the unique St. Louis things, or are you going to have the chemical building identify its own kind of...
No, it's going to be an extension of Hotel St. Louis.
Okay.
And the rooms are going to feel a lot like the rooms at Hotel St. Louis in the existing building.
All right.
But for example, in the Hotel St. Louis, we took pieces of the architecture photographs and we had wallpaper made out of them that are from the Louis Sullivan. And on the chemical building, we'll take pictures of pieces of the chemical building and have the wallpaper made out of that, because it should be an homage also to the building. It should also reference the building, right? So some of that room architecture will go into the new building, but it'll be based on the building architecture.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Sure. Now, if you have not been down to Hotel St. Louis or down to the restaurant down there, you walk into the lobby and you see this stained glass above. How's that coming? Is that...
Oh, it's done.
It's done. Okay,
It's
so I
completely
haven't seen
done.
it since it's completed yet.
No, it's
Oh, yeah,
completely
it's done.
done.
Okay.
And it is stunning. I mean, Adam did such a beautiful job on it. It's really stunning. And I can't say enough about Adam Johnson and the work he did there and how hard he worked until 3 o'clock in the morning, because he's a carpenter. He had a regular job, came home, dealt with kids, and then stayed up late at night to create this amazing stained glass window. So
These are labors of love. I appreciate contractors. It's an art form. What they do, we think, okay, what can it be to nail 2 different 2x4s together? But people who know how to do it, it's just not a skill. It's an art. And we many times don't think about it that way, or plumbers or electricians, but they know what to do, or HVAC people. They've got it all figured out. And I can do that, and it goes like this and goes like this, and you're like, okay, I don't understand it, but as long as you do and it meets code,
Well,
that's great.
it's funny though, they'll call you, and I just got a call. We're doing a project up in Sioux City, Iowa. And the contractor just called me and he said, well, you don't really care if you have a 5-foot vanity versus a 4-foot vanity, because we're a little tight on some of these places. And I was like, yes, I do care. Right?
Matters.
No, I want a 5-foot vanity. And he's like, well, and I said, no. Right? I want to, and he goes, all right, I'll have to send you some drawings. I'm like, okay, but you know what I want, so you've got to do it this way. Because, sometimes the contractors will say the easy way is the way, but it's not always
And
the easy
BSI
way.
knows that. And BSI is up in Sioux City with us.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
They're very big, reputable company.
yes, they are.
Oh, yeah.
And speaking of Iowa, you have some situations going on up there because of the floodwaters. We're getting this monsoon season here, and I'm not complaining, because last year we didn't get spring.
Right.
We went right from winter to summer, so we are actually getting spring, although it's creating some issues, and has created some issues for you up in Iowa. Describe some of those things.
Well, we are currently above flood stage in Davenport, which is the place that we're most worried about right now, and it's been on the national news. But the water is about 25 feet from the door of one of our hotels, which is on 3rd Street. So if you can imagine, there's the river, and then there's a park, and then there's River Drive, and then
Second Street.
then Second Street, and then 3rd Street. So you can imagine how many people are flooded out right now.
Well, we had a HESCO barrier actually fail on Tuesday, and there's cars underwater. There's apartments that have been flooded because they didn't have time to get out.
This is a building you've renovated already.
No, not all our buildings are safe.
The only thing that
It's
we
the community
we own
that's-
part of a brewery
Gotcha.
up there that's completely underwater right now. But
Yeah.
and I feel so sorry for them. But they said, they were standing in the door of the brewery watching one of the city worker guys putting sandbags behind the barrier just to reinforce
shore
it.
it up.
And the barrier broke. It's a levee, right? It's a man-made levee, and it broke. And the guy jumped out of his bulldozer and ran up the street. And they said, "Oh, that's kind of a comedy thing. Look at this guy running up the street." And then they saw the water coming behind him, and they all ran. But our friend who runs the Figge Art Museum, so if you can imagine, the Figge is a David Chipperfield art museum designed by the same guy who designed the addition to the current art museum in St. Louis. He had to be rescued by boat out of his apartment
Oh my.
because the levee broke and they couldn't get people out quickly enough. People were coming up the stairs trying to get away from the water. It's really, and it's so hard it's a small community, but I mean, the good news is people are really banding together. All of us who are down there are doing, happy hours and fundraisers and, having, concerts, everything to try to help these small businesses because it's your neighbors.
Right.
These are, your really close friends and your neighbors, and everybody's trying to help everybody.
And the fallout is going to continue for a long time.
Absolutely.
Because the flood zone maps are going to get redrawn. And when they get redrawn, businesses that were not in the flood zone are now going to need flood insurance, which is extremely expensive. The ramifications of this are going to carry on for a long time. So
Yeah, it's an interesting, trying to put a show together to talk about the building of levees where individual municipalities or cities can do that apart from the Army Corps of Engineers to force water further downstream. And I was reading as recently as yesterday that St. Charles was wanting to do something with an island in the middle of the Missouri to, my words, revitalize that area and build some commercial development there. It's like, what are you thinking? It's kind of like, I understand Chesterfield Valley and all of that, a lot of money coming out of there, but that was an area that the Missouri could actually move itself out into and absorb some water, not into the ground, but just
spread out and absorb.
Right.
And these rivers were never meant to be channeled the way they're
Correct.
being channeled.
Correct.
And the way Davenport has done it is still the right decision, even though I suspect that in the wake of this flood, there's going to be a lot of debate about whether they did the right thing 35 years ago or not, which was to remove all those levees, really, and only create temporary barriers to protect, the eastern end of downtown. All the old buildings along River Drive are all gone. They removed them. They built this beautiful park that allows the river to just kind of flood it, and it's all stuff that you just hose down later. It's a wonderful model to help communities that are further downstream. But I have a feeling that after this flood, there's going to be some debate about whether they should build a flood
They do
wall.
what's called natural flood planning.
Right.
So even their ballpark, which is built in that park, is built to flood. It's really funny. And it's actually so much more beautiful than here. We have all these huge flood walls. I mean, how many times do you get to see the Mississippi here? Like hardly ever.
not
and
unless
when
you
you
go
do,
down to the Arch area.
right?
Whereas
And
in
when you do,
Davenport, the
it's
Mississippi
channeled
is right
really
there.
tightly,
So-
and it doesn't look very good because it's rushing by you. Versus up there, they swim in it, they boat in it,
beautiful.
they jet
Wow.
ski in
It's
it,
beautiful.
because it's allowed to spread out and go slowly and be beautiful. And so it's actually better planning than here, and it's but
But then at times like this,
yeah.
Right. So I have like one last question, and it relates to what I talked about at the front end of our interview. Was you have this passion to really see buildings renovated, to see historic structures stay. Where did that come from?
So our passion is more about neighborhoods than individual buildings.
Okay.
So I have to tell you, working on a Daniel Burnham, a Henry Ives Cobb, a Louis Sullivan, Preston Bradshaw, that's all been extremely gratifying. And we love all those architects, and it's been wonderful to get into their head and think about how they designed these buildings originally. But our passion is really more about neighborhoods, about bringing neglected neighborhoods back from the brink and having them full of people and commercial activity again. That's really where our passion lies. I mean, you want to talk about that?
It's funny because he got a call last week. He was laughing. I don't know if I'm talking out of school here, but he got a call last week from a guy who said, hey, we're out here in O'Fallon, and we really want you to come out here and build and, do all this stuff. And, we really want you to come. And he said, well, that's not really what we do. Right. And the guy said, well, but you can make all this money in O'Fallon. You can make, there's so much money out here. It's the land of milk and honey. Right. And he said, but that's not what we do, right?
Our mission is to strengthen and enhance the communities we operate in. And it's like, yeah, but you'll make a lot of money. He did not hear one word I had to say, I think.
Well, and so the listeners understand the example that they're talking about that I'm going to refer to is the Grove. I remember, I'm born and raised here in St. Louis. You would drive down Manchester. That was really dumpy back in only the 70s and 80s. And I never came back to the city.
Dangerous in the 90s.
Yeah, very, very dangerous, yes. And now it's a hubbub of restaurants and bars and a lot of commercial development, some very interesting businesses down there. So it's a great place to go. You guys are really the movers and shakers behind that.
And it's fun. I mean, it's hard work, and people always, you can look at like the giant buildings downtown and think, oh, that's a mission. But the real mission it was in the Grove, where 90% of the buildings we did, the roofs were in the basement. Right. There was so many buildings still currently that we're working on where they had been abandoned for 20 years. Right. And that for us has been such a fun life project.
Gratifying.
Right.
In so many ways.
And what kind of response have you gotten from the community, the neighbors?
I think they're really happy. We have a rule that we never buy occupied buildings. We only have a few exceptions to that rule, drug houses, things like that.
Right.
But we don't buy occupied buildings. So our goal has never been to gentrify a neighborhood. Our goal has always been to enhance the neighborhood and to give the people who currently live there, who currently invest there, even more capital, right? Because if you lived there before we started, your average home price was $30,000. If you live there now, your home price is somewhere between $250 and $400. Right. So that's a lot of money that you've been able to bank because of our work.
Yeah.
So of course you might ask, why are we downtown developing these big buildings downtown? Because downtown needs to be the thriving, beating heart for the entire region.
Correct.
And after spending 30 years trying to bring people to the city of St. Louis, to live in the city of St. Louis, we both realized that we were going to have to tackle the downtown problem as well and be a part of the solution there.
That's right. You've done work in the Gate community. You've done work...
done a little work in Soulard and of course Skinkard Bolivar where we live. We've done like 100 buildings over there in the Loop, and so we've learned from all those neighborhoods. We've learned what works, what doesn't.
Right, and communities and neighborhoods are better for it. Again, appreciative. We've been talking to Amy and Amrit Gill from Restoration St. Louis. They've recently purchased the chemical building, which is right next door to their current Hotel St. Louis building, and it's going to become a part of the Hotel St. Louis that will open in the winter of 2020. And you guys are, I admire you for what you're doing, and I think it's been a great benefit to St. Louis and the neighbors and the neighborhoods to keep communities sound and keep them whole and balanced. And I really appreciate you're not trying to, we're not going to gentrify here. It is what it is. The neighborhood is what it is, and you're just trying to make it beneficial for everybody involved. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Arnold Stricker with Ellie Wharton. You're listening to KWRH LP 92.9 FM, your community radio station in Webster Groves, Missouri.